Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Financial Advisors Workshop. We have a really fascinating gentleman here to discuss his practice with us today, so we can all learn from the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the other things that Mike has learned. We have Mike Garry, and Mike runs Yardley Wealth Management, right? You call it?
Yep.
Okay, Wealth Management, Yardley. Welcome to the Financial Advisor Workshop, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I noticed
Excellent.
you said ugly when you were looking right at me. I won't take that personally.
Okay, yeah, no ugly. No problem. So Mike, we talked a little bit earlier, and let's talk about your financial practice. But before we get there, you started out as a lawyer. So that'll be interesting to hear the evolution of how a lawyer became a financial advisor.
Sure. I worked 2 law firms in Philadelphia. I was miserable every second of every day doing that work.
Okay.
And at one of the recruiting, not one of the networking functions that the second firm encouraged me to go to, I met a recruiter from Merrill Lynch, and we talked briefly, and she said that my MBA and law degrees would be very marketable as a financial advisor. My wife and I took a long walk on the beach in Cape May that summer, and we had the whole sunk cost of me spending 3 years of my life and $70,000 on law school. But when I went to the Merrill branch, they were all smiling and happy, and they had nice cars. And I went to the law firm, we were all miserable and had a lot of debt. And yeah, my wife and I talked about it, and really what we thought was, in either career, you have an okay career, or you can have an amazing career. And I was finance undergrad, was finance MBA. I took all sorts of electives in law school that are perfect for financial planning, without knowing that they were at the time. So I took all the tax and investments, estate planning, all that stuff. And so we figured we'd try it. I made the switch, and I'm so happy that I did it.
Well, good. Well, the big opportunity to be a financial advisor. So then how did you do it? I hear you looked at a particular training program in a firm.
Yeah, so I went and I started at Merrill Lynch, or I guess it's just called Merrill now, in September of '98, and was there for just under 3 years.
Okay. So why did you go to Merrill? What was it? What was the evolution of going there?
Sure. So that the recruiter that I talked to was from Merrill. And, when I did whatever research you could do on the internet in 1998, people seemed to be, I don't know, talked it up a lot, seemed to be a lot of praise. There was a lot of, I heard a lot of people say very good things about its training program. And, as someone who'd already did 5 years of grad school, the training was important. I probably overvalue education compared to the world at large. And it sounded good. I thought, give me a couple of years to figure out the right way to do this and be successful in this. And I was really looking forward to it. I was happy about it.
Nice. So once you got there, you went through training, and you were there, you say 3 years?
Yep, just under 3 years.
So how did the professional development that was much lauded, how did that work out? Was it as good as you thought, or were there some gaps in the program?
Yeah, I think there were some gaps. Look, it's been more than 20 years, so I can't speak to what they do now. But at the time, the training was really sales oriented, right? So there was Dale Carnegie training. I had to go to training in Princeton every once in a while. And it was really about getting people in the door. And meanwhile, I would ask basic questions about what are the mutual fund share classes. And my sales manager said, don't worry about that. Just get people in here. We'll take care of that then. And I didn't love that. I had worked as a lawyer for a couple of years, and I was not really comfortable with that. But I did the best that I could. I did well. I always had far exceeds on all of their goals, so I always got the highest bonus that they offered. But when it came time to be finishing up there, I didn't feel like I learned a whole lot from them. I did take their internal designation, so I learned some stuff from that. I forget even what that's called now, but I forget. But yeah.
So okay, so then the evolution led to you leaving Merrill, and it involved your being a lawyer and then joining a new firm. Let's hear about that.
Sure. So I left Merrill to join an RIA firm in Princeton, New Jersey, where I was the director of financial planning, and I didn't have to bring in any clients. So that was a relief after, almost 3 years of having to do that daily while learning what I was doing. And we had 3 young kids at the time. I guess our oldest was still 6 or 7. And our youngest were born in 2000 and 2001. So I left in 2001. So right before my youngest was born, and my oldest, it was on her first birthday. It was my first day with the new guy. And that was good. I wound up working for him for 4.5 years. I learned about being fully independent. We were fee only. There was no brokerage affiliation. And it was very different. He had the type of clients, I guess, that Merrill wanted me to get. Without having the stress of trying to bring in clients, I could learn more about actually being a financial planner. And so in a lot of ways, it was a great job. It was a great fit. And, I always felt lucky that there aren't a lot of jobs now for financial advisors where you don't have to worry about bringing in clients to earn a paycheck. And so back then, I don't think there could have been very many at all. I think I had a pretty fortunate spot there. At least for that part of my time, when the kids are all little, it was a nice break from the grind before and the grind after.
So everybody in our industry has to be a hunter and gatherer, and maybe there should be some more roles for people who aren't salespeople.
Yep. Right? Yeah, we have an advisor in our firm that we hired a year ago. She's now in her 5th year as an advisor, and she does not have a hunter-gatherer role. She does planning and stuff related to planning, and she handles a lot of our investments. We go through everything together, obviously, but she runs all the screens in Tamarack to see if any trades need to be made. If she thinks that any need to be made, she'll put them up there for me to review. Then I'll either approve them or send it back to her and say, hey, I don't think this makes sense in this situation. And so I agree. There should be more non-hunter-gatherer roles in this industry.
So when you left and you went from Merrill to the new firm, you said you didn't bring any accounts with.
Right.
How could you call those people anyway? Could you just call them, even if, you could have called them, right?
Yeah, I probably could have. I don't know. I probably had some sort of an agreement with Merrill about solicitation. I don't remember. And just remember at the time being relieved that I didn't have to worry about that. And I probably, probably wouldn't have had very many clients that would have met his minimum.
Okay. So one thing that while you were there, Merrill put you in a position where they asked you to make a choice to how you're going to keep your book. You achieved their goals. You got to the 10 million they asked you to get, but then they put you in a position that kind of almost caused you to leave to go to the RIA.
Oh yeah. So what they did was that they completely changed the compensation structure so that. So I'm in Yardley, Pennsylvania, Bucks County, half hour north of Philadelphia. Right across the river here in Hopewell, New Jersey, they built a call center right at that time, and it's in between my new office and my last office. You see it on 95. Anyway, they built that call center, and they told us that, it's part of our new compensation that accounts under a certain size, if they didn't go to the call center, we'd either get paid a reduced amount or nothing. And I forget what those dollar amounts were, but like 250 and 100,000 for the relationship kind of stick in my mind. And so as a new advisor who just was opening whatever accounts he could, because every day I'd see what my revenue totals were, what my asset totals were, and the financial planning totals were in a market that is in the process of going down by half. I opened a lot of accounts that were on the smaller side. And they seemed fine with opening those accounts. They never said, oh, you can't open that account for only $85,000. But then, as I'm about to leave, the first 2 years of production, I hate that word, but that's the word. You got a salary and you get bonuses. And so I got the salary and I got a raise I asked for and got a raise after my first year because I was at Forest Seeds for everything. And I got the Forest Seeds bonuses and was on pace to get them all the second year. And it was about 9 months between the time I started and when I went into production, because I worked as an assistant for the branch manager that I worked for, which was fine for me. It was good. And so as we're getting towards the end, I'm looking at the numbers and the 10 million and like the haircut of either the assets going to Hopewell or not. When I got signed on, they said, you get $10 million after your second year, you go into the third year, you should make 100,000. I was looking at that and, I think a 30% payout would have been high considering all the things. And I was like, well, that's $30,000. I've got 3 kids now, or 2 kids now, and 1 on the way. Like I can't live on half of that. It was a tough time to be marketing as the, 9/11 happened a couple months later, and the markets bottomed out in October, but it was a hard time. And, the whole thing was just bring this stuff in or, not. And so I looked for and found a job where I didn't have to worry about bringing in accounts. And I could learn more about financial planning and about like the whole investment world so that to foster my professional development. I really feel like what they did was, so many people didn't make it. And when the RVP who signed me up said, 75% of people are not going to be in this industry after 5 years. You can't help but think that if they know that and they put all that money into people, into the so-called professional development, it has to be like part of their business strategy, right? They get those accounts and then those people leave and those accounts are just divvied up among whoever's still at the branch. And, there's a lot of inertia in this business, right? So maybe you sign up an account because you came at a time when somebody had a reason for money to be in motion. You sign up the account and then you don't make it. And I go back to being a lawyer or whatever. Those accounts would just stay there, unless there was some other reason for them to leave. So maybe that's, I did go to law school, so there is some cynicism baked into my thought process. But you can't help but think that must be part of the strategy.
Must be part of the deal. So all those accounts, the 10 million or so you opened originally, then most of those are still there, right? They never left. It never came with you.
I would think. Now, after I left working for my older boss, some people did wind up becoming clients here once I went out on my own, but not most of them.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So maybe there is something to that. Maybe bringing all these advisors in, spending a little bit of money on them, they figure out that they're going to open up a certain number of accounts on average, and then we'll give those to somebody else, and they'll get paid on them, or we'll move into a call center, we'll make more money on them. So maybe in retrospect, saying to get to 10 million and then giving you bad payouts to force your hand, maybe that was part of the strategy.
Yeah, it might have been, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to see how it couldn't be, because they'd see it played out all the time, right? Like if the guy knew that 3 out of 4 people he made that deal with were not going to make it, right? Like what?
Right.
Those are bad odds. What kind of things do you do in your life where you say, ooh, 25%, that's good. Sign me up for that.
Exactly. Give me that stuff. Okay, well, so all right, well, so you moved on and you go join the RIA, and then that was a much bigger operation, and then eventually it became all yours, Yardley. So tell us about how that all worked.
Sure. So I was working at that RIA, and he was a good boss for the most part. And a couple of years into, and he's about 20 years older than me, and a couple of years into it, he said, well, I want you to be my succession plan. We'll figure out a way for you to buy me out over a long period of time so I could go gracefully into retirement and you could ultimately be the owner here. And I had mixed feelings on that because on one hand, you bind yourself with somebody, you have to really trust them. But on the other hand, I spent a couple of years trying to get accounts when I started at Merrill, and it's hard. It's not an easy way to go. And I'm not a naturally outgoing person. Like if there's a crowded space or a bunch of people in a room, I'm not going to be the one talking to everybody. I'm not going to be going up and talking to strangers. Perfectly fine one-on-one or having a conversation like this, but I'm just not that outgoing of a guy.
Okay.
So I was nervous about getting clients. And so we started down that road. We spoke to some lawyers in Princeton. He spent some money drafting documents. And then over a couple month period, he would always say, oh, I need to change this, I need to change that. And it was clear that he wasn't going to sign. And I was fine because I was a little bit nervous about signing. And then I was away New Year's going into 2005. I was at my sister's in Connecticut. My buddy that I worked with there, Scott, called and said, hey, Big Mike, I think Chief's planning on to sell. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I walked by his office and he sounded like he was arranging deal. And so I had a restless weekend, went back in, talked to him the next work day, whenever we got back, and said, hey, Chief, I hear you're thinking of selling. And he said, no. Well, maybe. And I like to say that Northeast Philly in me came out. So what does maybe mean in this context? I probably didn't say the F word to him. And he said, I have to look after my interests. And I said, well, you're right. I thought that's what we were doing, but I agree. And I walked out, went into my office, called my wife and said, we weren't sure whether we could trust them. Now we know we can. We need another plan. And so we started to hatch that. And it took about a year I went up working with him for another 13 months. The whole time trying to figure out what I would need to do in terms of like a setup for the LLC and the website, all this, a lot of things that you need to think about when you're going to start a business. And then left him February 10th, 2006. Started this RIA firm with 0 clients, 0 revenues. And it was a really, really hard 5 or 10 years, but I couldn't be happier now.
Okay.
My wife was actually concerned because that I'm not that outgoing, and she said, "Oh, that's great. You're a good advisor. Why don't you tell somebody you are?" I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But I got, what happened? What really helped for me is the internet really came along. I got SEO for Dummies from the library, and years ago figured out that content would be a good way for me to attract people. And so we've had newsletters going out for that whole time. The website has been updated several times, but at one point I did a website of my own using Yahoo Site Builder. And so there's always new content on the web. There's blogs. I've written 2 books. There's videos on YouTube, which are all on the website. And so the benefit of that is I don't really do a lot of there's a lot to that, but I don't do a lot of outreach. What happens? So people say, oh, I found you when I was looking for a question about my RSUs. You had done a video on it. I looked at some of your other videos. Now I feel like I know you, and they come in, and then, when people are a good fit, they very often become clients, because I think by the time they come in, it's pretty warm. Some people say, Yep.
So did you end up with any of the assets from the other firm? You did, right? You started with 0, but.
Yeah. So in the first year, 3 older women became clients. And so we ended 2006 with about $6 million. And most of that came in like October, November. And this weird period, my grandmother died in October of that year. And then in a 2-week span around that, we got like 6 new clients, which is I haven't had too many of those 2-week periods since then. Just kind of strange timing with that. But yeah, so I think we wound up being 3 ladies with I don't know if it was a total of $2 million that came from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So So then how did you build the rest of it from 6 million? You're over 100 now. How did
Yeah.
you get?
Yeah, well, one account at a time, really. So, the content, so we'd always have people reaching out. I did those paid for advertorials in those like little free magazines you get in your house. So I paid like $300 a month for that. So I could write like a 300 word piece. Some great people in the first couple of years came from that. Yeah, like over time, the website has been the biggest source by a lot. And then ultimately, I do have two CPAs that refer business to us. And then not a lot, but some. And then I've done one of the big lessons that I learned from my old boss is the power of third-party endorsements. So I've been quoted in the press a number of times, probably more than 100. And that helps, you don't often, I always say no one says, oh, I saw you in this paper and I decided to call you. I actually do have a client who like in 2010 saw my first Wall Street Journal appearance and said, and he's from Staten Island. And he said, oh, I saw you in the Wall Street Journal. You're good enough for them. You must be good enough for me. And I said, Doc, there's like 100,000 advisors between where you are in New York and where I am. But I said, if you come down, I will make the next trip up to see you. And yeah, he's been a great client ever since then. But yeah, all that stuff helps, right? So there's credibility from that and from the books. People see them in the library. And one client bought the first book at the airport in Charlotte. And I didn't even know it was available in the airport in Charlotte. I thought she must be kidding. But yeah, she got it. It's our biggest client.
So building a career as an author, financial author, has helped because it's created credibility.
Yeah, it's helped a lot, and it's something I'm comfortable with, right? Like I feel it's something I could do.
Tell us about your two books. Which one was first and then second?
So the first one was called Independent Financial Planning, Your Guide to blah, 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 whatever. It came out in 2014.
Okay.
And the funny story about that is it's something I'd started that really years earlier. And it started with a lot of like musings on, kind of like some of the bad practices of Wall Street, right? And so like, I left Merrill and you couldn't help but notice that, they're settling something, they and the other wirehouses were settling various suits all the time in the Wall Street Journal. And I started with that. And I kind of took a different path. And at one point I signed on a client who's a client now, and she owns a firm that does publicity for authors who write about their industries. And so I told her I was writing, and she said, oh yeah, that if you're ever interested more, okay. And then about 2 years later, I thought, you know what, I'm going to call her. And I said, listen, I don't know how I'm ever, like, I feel like I'm never going to finish this. Do you have any like advice or what I could do? And it's so funny. She totally turned the financial planning tables on me. She said, well, Mike, if you want to achieve a goal, first you need to clarify, like, what is your actual goal? What are you trying to achieve? And then if you know that, then like how long will it take and how much will it cost? And are those acceptable to you? And if so, that's what you need to do to finish your book. I laughed so hard. Like, Sandy, I've been saying that to you for years. And anyway, she put me in touch with resources to help me edit it, come up with a cover, and all those things. And so we put that book out in February of 2014, and it was pretty cool. It was really pretty cool. And then this last one, I was listening to a podcast, and Dave Ramsey was saying something. He said something like, I don't know any millionaires who ever had a mortgage on their house. And it's like, that's total BS. I know 100 millionaires who have had mortgages on their houses. Like, yes, maybe they get to a point where they no longer have a mortgage, or maybe they're worth 50 million and they don't have it. But you can't say that no one's ever had, like, no one who's financially successful has ever had a mortgage. That's just not true. Right. And then like listening to the rest of the podcast, there's some other things. So this book was a guide to, the smart person's guide to financial planning and investments. And I really went through, and this one is more to talk about, basics of financial planning and investments, and then a little bit more about some common misperceptions and various, my take on various investments. Again, I'm very happy to have done it. It's, and I don't think it'll be the last one. I think now I found a process. My wife actually says this one's pretty good. So maybe the third one will be actually good.
It's good to see she's on board. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see she's on board. So you just have kind of the need to write, huh? In a sense.
So yeah, sometimes I do. I feel passionate about that.
You're a real writer then. That's what writers are. You're a real writer. So okay, interesting. What's the name of the second book? First
the
one
smart. The second book is The Smart Person's Guide to Financial Planning and Investments.
Smart. Okay, good. Okay, and you focus on strategies like, yes, millionaires often do have mortgages because it's cheap money,
right?
Even if they don't need it,
right?
Right.
So it is like a basics of financial planning and investments with some. There's about 8 or 10 like stories talking about, say like couples talking about retirement, and they have different thoughts on what that would be and how you really should sit down and figure what that means. You both say, oh, you want to travel in retirement. Okay, well now you're 62 and you're going to retire in 2 years. You need to actually come up with that means, because one of you might think that means like 6 months safari, and the other one thinks like it's a 2-week vacation at Disney World. You need to hammer that out.
Right.
You have to have those conversations, and sometimes they're hard, but you need to have them.
Yes.
And so a lot of subjects like that, I think. Sometimes I think that people who have never worked with advisors don't really know what to expect. And
right.
I don't know I think they think they'll be judged because they haven't done everything right, or they're not thinking the right things. And once people have actually had a good advisor, they generally love them and find them to be very helpful and well worth the cost. And so I try to put stories in there about how we can actually help and do good work. I do think we do good work in this industry. Like everything else, there are bad actors, but it's not that hard to find a good advisor either.
Well, it sounds great. So, Mike, you're also an Ironman. Why are you doing Ironman? Tell us about that.
Sure. So, I had always liked endurance stuff. I was on a crew team in high school. I did a marathon in 1997. Listeners might not realize I'm about 5'11". Spent most of my adult life between 250 and 260. I'm about 235, 238 now. So I'm not your typical image of a endurance athlete, but I've always been fascinated by it. And
Sure.
It really was in 2018 in February, and I've always like gone to the local gym. We did some like weight training or bike riding or running, and my feet were really hurting. And my wife said, "Why don't you go swim? That never hurts." And I hadn't swam in a while, but I did. I swam like 20 laps, and I was breathless the whole time. But my feet didn't hurt. Felt like a good workout, so I did that again, and I did that. Kept doing that for a couple of months, and every July we do a charity bike ride from Philadelphia to Atlantic City, 65 miles, and it raises money for the children of fallen first responders. And my father-in-law was a firefighter, and his father-in-law was a firefighter, and my paternal grandfather was a police officer, all in Philadelphia, and they all made it to retirement. And so there's a special feeling, like if something happens, but somebody gets shot or dies in a fire, you want to help their kids. So it's a great fundraiser. We've been doing it for a long time. And so most springs we start to ride a decent amount. And so in May, I was starting to get to have a pretty good mileage. So I got up to like 160 laps, which is about what you need to do to finish an Ironman. I said to my wife, if I can do that in 2 hours, then I'm going to sign up next year. I'll sign up at the end of July for Lake Placid Ironman next year. And she's like, okay. And I just broke it down into planning. And so it's like, you have it's 2.4 mile swim in an open body of water, not a pool. So like a lake or a river or the ocean, 112-mile bike ride, and a marathon, 26.2 miles. And you have 17 hours to do it. And if it takes you 17 hours and a second, you get a DNF, did not finish. And so it's further broken down. You have 2 hours and 20 minutes to do the swim. So people get pulled out of the water if they don't do it in time. And then you do transition, you go to bike, then you have the further 8 hours and 10 minutes. And so what happens is after you do the bike, you have 6.5 hours left. And once I could do the swim in 2 hours, I thought, well, I could probably do it a little bit more than that in a race.
Yes.
And then I've ridden 65 miles a lot of times, probably like 20 or 30 between the charity and training for it. I've never done more than that. And I thought, well, but it's just riding a bike, right? You could just do it.
Yeah, no problem.
And then I figure, you have 6.5 hours to walk and run a marathon. And, like there's plenty of time for walking. I don't have to like run the whole thing. I'm not trying to set a PR or anything.
Right.
And that's pretty much the way it played out. It took like 2:05 for the swim. And then I was exhausted. It took a few minutes to go through transition. And I got off the bike probably about 6:10. And I probably got to the, that's like in the early evening. So it took me almost 8 hours for the bike. And then, I had from about 6:20 to about midnight to get the 26.2. And it was really close. It took me 16:53:09. And so for a lot of the time, we were very concerned that I would be swept off the course, that I wouldn't be able to make it. But I did. And I heard Mike Riley say, "You did it, Michael Garry, you are an Ironman." And it was really cool.
So Michael, it's almost like the same way you had to get your book together, and that friend gave you good guidance about make a plan, figure it out, carve it up in pieces, achieve them all. That's what you did for Ironman as well.
Yeah, like it's amazing how what we do for a living can extend to so many areas of your life, right? Yes. You wouldn't ordinarily think like being a financial advisor would help in doing an Ironman. But I did, like while swimming what seemed to be endless laps, I was breaking it down in my head, like, well, if I do this, then this will happen. And what wound up happening actually is in July, when I was getting ready to sign up for Lake Placid, I switched and did sign up for Ironman Maryland that same year at the end of September. And I did that, a nice little course correction, like financial advisors will advise once in a while. Because I thought, like I'm 51, I'm heavy to be doing this. I've been fortunate to be like completely uninjured for a few months. Am I really going to be not injured for 13 more months, and be able to do this? And I just thought it was actually safer doing it, a couple of months later. And I was at the point where, I was as trained as I ever am for the bike, and I was as trained as I ever am for the swim. And now the hard thing is the run, because I had run a lot in my youth and in my 20s and 30s, and it always hurt my feet. I've got all sorts of feet issues. I've had gout. I've had plantar fasciitis, like everybody who runs has. I have an extra bone called an accessory navicular in my right foot, probably have it in my left foot too. And so I didn't do any running in training for that Ironman, like not one jog, which is an unusual race strategy. But what I figured was, if I ran, I might get injured doing that. And if I just run in the race and I get injured, as long as I could still do it, I could ice up for the next week or two, whatever it would take. And so, that's how it all came out.
To be okay. Wow. Fascinating. So Mike, you've built a great practice now. A lot of the great principles of life you've built into it. Where do you see the industry going now? You're up over 100 million. You've got a great company.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard not to see the continued shift into independence, whether it's the fully independent RIA route, which I love, and I would highly encourage people, or an independent broker dealer. It's different, I think, than the wirehouses. It's hard not to see, I think that whole advice, pay for advice will continue. That's a little bit different, but people are having a lot more success with that now, certainly, than any time they would have in history. when I offered that 16 years ago, people just thought it was the weirdest thing, paying for a check for
Pay
financial
for it.
advice.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But I think, for some people, it makes a lot of sense. And so I could see that growing, and that would be a good way to serve parts of the community that aren't served. It's a good way to get planners to do more planning and less like hunting and gathering.
Yes. Well, very good. Well, so do you see any trends in the industry that you might want to point out to our colleagues? So couple hundred financial advisors, and eventually a couple thousand financial advisors will see this. So what would you like to tell them? What trends do you see happening and what to watch for?
Yeah, I would tell them that things that are important are lifelong learning about the industry and giving advice. All of the stuff you need to learn to be a competent financial advisor, and then really like try to always stretch and grow. Do new things. Try to learn stuff. I've seen some advisors who are older than us who just kind of like, I don't know. They just go in, they turn on the computer, they talk to the same 5 people every day and turn off at the end of the day. It's a brave, exciting world out there. Do new like the podcast, like, talk to other advisors. I think that's a great idea, right? Like, yeah.
Like we're doing
And
here.
then
Exactly.
once you've had some success, there's always other younger advisors that need some help. Help them out. Teach them things, mentor them, take them to lunch once a quarter or something. Let them pick your brain. That time, has so much more value for them than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Like I remember starting out in this business, the handful of people who would answer questions or talk to me, because there's so much that you don't know when you're starting. For those that feel like that's holding them back, don't let it. There's always going to be stuff you don't know. You just need to keep learning and figure out, what you need to figure out. Like, don't let that imposter syndrome hold you back. Like if you have a gap, fix it. But don't think that you don't know anything. You probably know more than you think.
So responsibility essentially to the industry to help pass on your knowledge in a sense, right?
Yeah, I think so.
We're big fans of that at Financial Advisors Workshop. That's why we launched it. And so we appreciate your being part of that, Mike. And this is a great visit. We really enjoyed meeting you and all of our colleagues are all the benefit for your knowledge, experience, and dogged determination to write books and do Ironman. And it's all great. It's really great.
Well, thanks so much, Brian. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a great time, and I love that you're trying to teach people stuff. And I think that's how we ultimately become a true profession. When we pass on that knowledge and help people, and it's not just some cutthroat hunter-gatherer world out there.
Yes, it's left to the senior people in the industry to help pass on that knowledge to make sure people get better and better, and that's what we're all about. So thanks for sharing your thoughts with all of us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Brian. It's been great.
All right, we'll leave it there. And we'll be back with another great episode of the Financial Advisors Workshop with another great financial advisor like Mike Garry. All right. Thanks, everybody.